How exactly do I get onto this old bridge with my German four-wheel drive expedition truck? The bridge is about 100 years old and one of the highest in the USA, only slightly wider than my truck. And it rattles and wobbles when you drive over it like an old granny's dentures. A 36-year-old Mercedes four-wheel drive truck in its prime. A German oak tree in its prime. The entire North American continent, and an appointment in Alaska. 8,000 kilometers solo to the Arctic Circle, from Las Vegas to Anchorage. Snow, dust, fog, grizzlies, bison, moose, lots of mosquitoes, boiling mud, one of the most beautiful coastlines in the world, and many national parks. Will I make it to the north in time? And if so, what condition will the truck and the oak tree be in? I had stored the truck in an RV storage facility in Las Vegas for 8 months. Contrary to all expectations, nothing was damaged. And after the battery was reconnected, the engine fired up immediately. Aldi USA had recently opened a supermarket in Las Vegas, where prices are 20 to 30% below the usual level. So I did my first shopping there, then filled both tanks with cheap Nevada diesel at around 80 cents per liter. I topped up with 400 liters of fresh water and set off early the next morning towards Death Valley in the north, with a forecast of 43 degrees Celsius. The shortest route to Anchorage is 5,500 kilometers, but I'm not going to take the shortest way to Alaska. On the first day, I manage about 400 kilometers before jet lag takes over. Mono Lake is located near the eastern entrance to the Yosemite National Park, and nearby is the best preserved ghost town in the USA, Bodie. Bodie was founded as a gold mining town in 1859 and had a population of 10,000 in its heyday. It had many hotels, 65 saloons, several daily newspapers, a red light district, a Chinatown, a school, and even a railroad line. Unfortunately, in 1932, there was a major fire that burned down all the buildings except those that still stand today. Gold and silver worth $85 million were mined in Bodie until 1941. It is particularly tragic that the discoverer of the gold, Wakeman Bodie, died in a snowstorm in November of the same year and never got to enjoy the greatest find of his life. There are 63 national parks in the USA, and some are so small and unknown that you tend to come across them by chance. I found Lassen Volcanic National Park on my way northwest in the Rocky Mountains. You are only allowed to stay overnight in national parks at official campsites, which are almost always fully booked in summer, but you can legally camp in the nearby national forest. The national park leads up into the Rocky Mountains to an altitude of almost 3,000 meters, and so early in the year, there was still plenty of snow up there. Walking around in the snow in a t-shirt and shorts is pretty cool. It wasn't actually that cold. On the 5th day, I finally reached the Pacific coast. This is certainly not the fastest way to get to Alaska, but the coast is one of the most beautiful in the world and a must-see.
This is bad luck. This is the most scenic viewpoint at the entire coast. And I had to hike up here for 5 kilometers, and now it's foggy.
Redwood National Park stretches over 60 kilometers along the coast, with countless hiking trails, the most beautiful of which require a permit. Many scenes from the movie Jurassic Park were filmed here.
It's extremely silent here. A few birds. One is talking pretty silent.
The tallest tree here is quite originally named Big Tree and is 87 meters high. The spectacular shoreline is almost always shrouded in fog in the morning, and it's not until around noon that the sun sometimes manages to break through. Countless viewpoints invite you to linger and marvel, but overnight stays are always prohibited at the viewpoints and state parks. I have now made it from California to the state of Oregon. Hexata Head Lighthouse is the most beautiful lighthouse on the coast, and the lighthouse keeper who was allowed to work here at the time had hit the jackpot. It was built in 1894 and automated in 1963, and you can now stay overnight in the former lighthouse keeper's house. The complex is also located on a great beach, and the Cape Creek Bridge spans the narrow valley. While searching for a nice place to stay, I discovered the wonderful Cape Meares Lighthouse further north. There was a legal place to stay nearby, with a view of the Pacific Ocean and together with other overlanders.
This is magic, isn't it? Directly view to the Pacific Ocean. Oh my God.
The coast has many bays and deep fjords that the road winds around, but sometimes there are shortcuts. Continuing north, I had now arrived in the last state before the Canadian border, Washington. One beach here is more beautiful than the next, but you are almost never allowed to stay overnight on the beach. Near Tokeland, I finally found my private beach, with the sea right outside my door.
It's at least 2 meters high and several kilometers of driftwood. Unbelievable.
In the far northwest of Washington state is the Olympic Peninsula, with its national park and national forest of the same name. Deep in the national forest are 2 former railroad bridges that were built for transporting timber. The pedestrian was quite nervous when my 9 tons rolled across the bridge, but there was no weight restriction. The bridges are among the highest in the U.S. and were built in 1929. This one was converted into a road bridge in 1970, while the second bridge was decommissioned and is no longer accessible. It was not until 1888 that the first white settler reached Lake Quinault, located in the west of the Olympic Peninsula. The area is famous for its rainforests, and I actually only wanted to take a short walk here, but because it was so beautiful, it turned into a hike.
It's a bit scary. This is bear country. So a few hundred meters behind me, there was a noise in the trees, but there are only 2 birds.
The The most famous beach on the Olympic Peninsula is Kalaloch Beach. Roughly translated, this means canoe launch and landing. And because the coastline is steep and rocky overall, it is one of the few beaches in the area. I was lucky with the weather again. It was very foggy all morning, and just as I arrived, the sun came out. It takes 20 minutes to get back to the mainland from the Olympic Peninsula by ferry. There are only a few deep-water seaports on the Pacific coast, and to protect the approach to Seattle, Fort Casey was built around 1900 and was the most modern of its kind for 10 years. The cannons are not original. These were used against Japan in the Philippines during World War II and still have shrapnel damage. I spent the night in a small parking lot with a fantastic view over the bay, in the pleasant company of a van life couple from Germany. Even ladies in their prime appreciate personal care, so before crossing the border into Canada, I ordered a truck wellness for $70. Shopping, refueling, and then across the border.
Successfully made it to Canada. He asked several questions about alcohol, cigarettes, weapons, etc. But it was no problem at all.
High in the mountains of southern Canada is the Myra Canyon Rail Trail, a spectacular 22-kilometer bike or hiking route on the former Kettle Valley Railway line. The trail is 650 kilometers long and part of the legendary 18,000-kilometer Trans-Canada Trail. The railway was completed in 1915 and operated until 1945. There are lots of bridges and also a few tunnels. The wooden bridges burn down from time to time during forest fires and have to be replaced. But the steel bridges are still the originals. The tour leads around the entire valley with little incline. In the evening, I found a great place to stay above Kalamalka Lake, where the rich and beautiful live. I felt very comfortable here.
Not so bad.
Canada is bear country, so you should always carry bear spray with you when hiking in Canada. I bought a can in an outdoor store in the pretty little town of Revelstoke.
Made it 55 Canadian, it's 40 euro.
You should only use it in emergency situations when the bear is about 4 meters away. Ideally, not when the wind is blowing in your direction. If you use it too early, it won't work properly. If you use it too late, it's too late. Near Banff National Park, I found a campsite just as you would imagine it. The mountains in the area are over 2,000 meters high. There are several fire pits with other overlanders. Someone is playing guitar, cold beer, and the river is rushing in the background. Marble Canyon is nearby, which is an easy little hike that takes about an hour. The fantastic color of the water is caused by the limestone through which the canyon flows. Banff and Jasper National Parks are among the largest national parks in Canada. The Icefields Parkway connects both parks, is 230 kilometers long, and is one of the most scenic roads in the world. Due to the difficult terrain, construction took 10 years, and the road was completed in 1939. And once again, I found a super nice place to spend the night in the wilderness.
So cool. This is my place.
On the way to Jasper Village, I saw my first grizzlies. The two bears were not disturbed by the cars and tourists nearby.
I was a little bit under pressure in doing the laundry, so the dryer was finished, but I had to add more coins to add additional 20 minutes, so this is not the best solution.
The famous Alaska Highway, with a length of over 2,000 kilometers, starts in Dawson Creek. The roundabout is officially Kilometer Zero. The highway was built in just 8 months during World War II. Diesel gets more expensive with every kilometer north of here, so I filled both tanks to the brim. Dawson Creek also has a replica pioneer village with a church, school, barber shop, stores, and farm equipment. There is also a museum about the construction of the Alaska Highway. Of course, after 8 months of construction, it was just a gravel road with makeshift bridges, and it was expanded and improved by private companies later. To be honest, the first 500 kilometers on the Alaska Highway are flat and boring, so you're happy about every curve. Of course, the grass has to be cut here too. And because I was bored, I calculated how long it would take to cut 2,000 kilometers or 66 million square meters of grass. Only 3 years, which is actually doable, right? It wasn't until the second day on the Alaska Highway that the landscape became more interesting. Mountains, rivers, lakes, bridges, and wild animals right next to the road. In the evening, I found another great campsite, which is the runway of an old, abandoned airfield with several camp spots right by the river. Cooking and camping right on the riverbank. A dream come true. After 1,000 kilometers on the Alaska Highway, you arrive at the small town of Watson Lake. 800 residents, a few gas stations, a supermarket, and the biggest attraction in the area, the famous Signpost Forest. It was created by chance in 1943 during the construction of the Alaska Highway. A homesick soldier put up a sign for his hometown, and many more quickly followed. 80 years later, the number of signs is estimated at over 100,000, and the sign forest continues to grow. Anyone can add signs, and new poles are available for this purpose in the inner area. However, I didn't find a sign for my hometown of Karlsruhe. The Robert Campbell Highway is more or less 600 kilometers of gravel road, leading from Watson Lake northwest to the Klondike Highway. The term highway should not be taken seriously here. At the beginning, the road is still paved, but then it turns into a gravel road, just wide enough for a truck. There are almost no settlements along the way, and refueling, if at all, is only possible near the end.
This is magic, isn't it?
Somewhere in the middle, I turned into the forest in search of a place to spend the night. It was still early in the day, so I started by cooking a large pot of chili con carne. As beautiful as the spot in the forest was, The mosquitoes also knew where to find food, and there were a few dozen sitting on every mosquito net. They are also quite large here, almost like small birds. 3 or 4 of them fried with an egg make a meal. Thankfully, I had my secret weapon with me. Kanal Road was also built during World War II to carry a pipeline to Whitehorse. However, the pipeline soon became unprofitable, and today only the road remains, but it is not well maintained. You can get to the north side with a free ferry, but it's a dead end that ends somewhere in the wilderness today. And as almost every evening, I found again a great camp spot in the wilderness. After 600 kilometers of loneliness and vast wilderness, the Robert Campbell Highway joins the Klondike Highway, which leads to Dawson City, the gold rush mecca. The easiest way for gold miners at the beginning of the gold rush to get to the claims in Dawson City was a 700-kilometer raft trip down the Yukon River.
Grizzly bear. Oh.
They all had to pass the Five Finger Rapids, which were feared rapids at the time and were later blown up, and many lost all their equipment here. By the way, the steamboats that were later used for regular service here were pulled over the rapids with a winch. Dawson City, the mecca of gold diggers in the Yukon, was at the top of my bucket list. The city is absolutely legendary. Only the main street is paved, all the side roads are dirt roads, and the sidewalks are windy plank walkways. Due to the low temperatures, the houses are all made of wood, and when the Yukon River overflows its banks every 20 years during the snowmelt, they sometimes float away. That's why so many of them are slanted. Food is bought at the only general store in town, which is packed to the ceiling but has almost everything. You can still pan for gold at the original claim where the gold rush began in 1885. Back then, thumb-sized nuggets simply lay in the stream, and you could just pick them up. That triggered the gold rush, and 1 to 2 years later, hundreds of thousands were here. Nuggets were then hardly found anymore, and people resorted to the laborious task of panning for gold. This is probably more tourist gold. Gold is still mined heavily here. 570 tons, or 30 cubic meters of gold, have been officially found so far. And in 2024, it was still $321 million, or 3 tons. So the Discovery Channel documentary is real. After prospecting for gold by hand, mining companies were founded which, with the necessary funding, built dredgers, transported them here with great effort, and reassembled them. The most famous dredger is Dredge Number 4, which was in operation for 46 years and extracted 8 tons of gold. Its peak output was 8 kilograms per day, which is worth $1 million per day at today's value. The dredges were powered by electric motors and operated 24 hours a day from March to November. Before the railroad and the Alaska Highway were built, absolutely everything was transported on the Yukon River by steamboats. The SS Keno is in dry dock in Dawson City and can be visited. The boilers were heated with wood, and with a weight of 613 tons, the ship had a maximum draft of only 91 centimeters. It was in operation from 1922 to 1951.
It's 10 o'clock in the evening, sunset is around 12, and it's at 4 o'clock, it's sunrise. It's so crazy because I'm so close to the Arctic Circle.
To continue north from Dawson City, you have to cross the Yukon River by ferry. The following 130-kilometer section is called the top of the World Highway because it mostly runs along ridges at an altitude of about 1,000 meters and offers spectacular views. However, the weather gods were not very motivated, which is why I soon looked for a place to spend the night. And then, 2 hours later, right outside the window, I had a perfect stroke of luck. Unfortunately, the weather didn't improve much the next day. At some point, I reached the border crossing between Canada and Alaska, but it was completely covered in clouds.
Here it is. This is funny.
Chicken, Alaska is the next outpost of civilization after another 70 kilometers. It has a general store, an airfield, a few houses, another gold dredger, and an oversized chicken. The place was named after a snow grouse, but its Native American name was so complicated that chicken became the common name. An American hasn't been camping if there was no campfire. My next place to spend the night on a riverbank had enough firewood and was far enough away from the nearest forest, so go for it. Until 1971, the Denali Highway was the only access road to Denali National Park, the largest national park in the USA. It is one of the most beautiful roads in Alaska, with a length of about 200 kilometers, and about half of it is paved. However, the spectacular landscape can only be enjoyed in good conditions, so I had to wait a few days for a decent weather window. Shortly after the bridge, I found this fantastic parking spot. And because of the good weather, I stayed for 2 days. On day 3 on the Denali Highway, it was typical Alaska weather. Once the dirt road gets wet, it quickly becomes muddy. Denali National Park is the largest national park in the USA, covering 20,000 square kilometers, and has over 500,000 visitors per year. There is only one road into the park, for which you have to take a bus shuttle. Of course, you can also see animals, but they are usually quite far away. On my way south towards Anchorage, I was lucky enough to see the highest mountain in the USA, Mount Denali, which has a height of 6,190 meters. Most of the time, it is shyly hidden behind thick clouds. 2 hours later, there is no sign of the perfect summer day anymore. My route takes me over the 1,200-meter-high Hatcher Pass to Independence Mine, an old gold mine located at an altitude of 1,300 meters in the mountains north of Anchorage. The mine was in operation from 1934 to 1950 and produced almost 5 tons of gold. Since it is located at 1,300 meters and so far north, the working conditions were, of course, extreme. With meters of snow in winter, the houses were connected by wooden tunnels and record temperatures of up to minus 25 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, the time has already destroyed many of the buildings. There is still plenty of gold here, but mining it is too time-consuming and expensive. Anchorage is 70 kilometers further south and can be easily explored by bike. Old and new are close together in the city center, and by chance, I stumbled across an exhibition of historic vehicles here. Next to the Aircraft Museum is Lake Hood Seaplane Base, the largest seaplane airport in the world, with 190 takeoffs and landings a day. Annette's arrival was imminent, so I quickly did some laundry, cleaned up, and headed to the airport. 8,000 kilometers in 6 weeks solo, from Las Vegas to Anchorage, without a breakdown and on time. What an adventure! Over the next 4 weeks, we'll be traveling together from Alaska to Vancouver. But that's a story for another video.